Abraham Lincoln was the 16th President of the United States of America. He was born on February 12, 1809, and he died on April 15, 1865. Just before Lincoln took office, South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas seceded from the Union to form what would come to be called the Confederate States of America. After Lincoln called for troops, Virginia, Arkansas, North Carolina, and Tennessee seceded from the Union as well. Lincoln called these troops in because in April of 1861, Union troops at Fort Sumter were fired upon and forced to surrender. Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, and Delaware were all slave states that did not secede from the Union. Lincoln urgently negotiated with their state leaders to tell them that he promised not to interfere with their slavery. In July of 1862, the United States Congress took steps towards freeing the slaves by passing the Second Confiscation Act. The goal of this act was to weaken the rebellion, which was made up of slave owners. Even though this act did not completely end slavery, it showed that Congress supported Lincoln's anti-slavery campaign. This new law was put into effect with Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. The Emancipation Proclamation was announced on September 22nd of 1862 and put into action on January 1st of 1863. When the Union Army was pressing south in the war, they were liberating slaves as they went on until all of the slaves in Confederate hands were freed. 4.5 months after the Union Army won at the Battle of Gettysburg, Lincoln gave his most famous speech as president. On November 19, 1863, Lincoln delivered the Gettysburg Address. This speech was so famous because it was dedicated to the soldiers who died for the advancement of our country.
77 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that this nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from this earth. This recording was produced by Telltale Weekly.
After General Robert E. Lee surrendered at the Appomattox Courthouse on April 9, 1865, Lincoln went to Jefferson Davis's office to say that he was the one leader of the entire nation. Shortly after that, on April 14, 1865, he went to Ford Theater, where he was shot by John Wilkes Booth, who was a well-known Confederate actor and spy from Maryland. Lincoln was pronounced dead the next morning.
I don't